So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to my colleague. I hope everyone is well and healthy today. Welcome to the Policy Roundtable, Unpacking the Neraca Komoditas, hosted by the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, or CIPS. While we are waiting for more people to join in the room, I would like to kindly request everyone here to change your display name into your name _ your institution, so we get to know where everyone's from in this Zoom room and maybe get to know each other. And thank you everyone again for joining us in this policy roundtable, which I believe would be a very insightful discussion. And maybe while we wait for others to come joining in, we have a little icebreaker before we start our session today. We will be launching a small polling, which should appear in your screen. We're curious to know how is everyone's working situation right now. Are you still working from home? Have you returned to the office? In our case here at CIPS, we're all still working at home and quite spread out across Indonesia. So it's nice to also know where people are working from at the moment. Thanks so much for joining our small poll. But wherever you are working from home or you've returned to the office, I really hope that everyone stays safe and stay healthy. And I hope you're having a great first month of the year. Okay, great. Let's wait a couple more minutes. I think more people have answered the question. I believe we can end the poll and then show the answer. So I think more people are still working at home. So that of course comes with great benefit, but also pain. So I hope everyone's staying safe and sane at home. And some of you have returned to the office. I hope you're all safe. Great. I think we'll get started now because we only have an hour, but we have a lot to discuss, which I believe would be quite an interesting and fun discussion for all of us. So again, I would like to welcome you to the Policy Roundtable, which is on the Unpacking the Neraca Komoditas, hosted by the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies. My name is Felippa. I am the head of research at CIPS, and I'll be the moderator for today. So thank you once again for attending today's discussion on Neraca Komoditas, which is quite a new term, but it's a new trade mechanism for import and export that was just launched today. Not today, sorry, this year. And as we know, the Indonesian trade system has faced a lot of challenges and controversies, especially for many commodities that rely on a very complicated process of licensing and quota. So now this new system is being rolled out called Neraca Komoditas as part of the implementation of the Omnibus Law on Job Creation, which aims to simplify the trade process. So today we'll be exploring the ongoing developments of Neraca Komoditas and what are the opportunities and challenges. We will be referring to it by its Indonesian name, the Neraca Komoditas, because it doesn't quite translate to English, which roughly translates to commodity balance sheet, but it's much more complicated than just the balance sheet. So we'll unpack all of that in this discussion. This discussion is actually based on our new publication that was written by our associate researchers, Krisna Gupta and Dr. Doni Pasaribu, and our senior fellow, Dr. Desi Pane. And we're quite grateful that we have all three of them joining in this room today. But we have Krisna Gupta, who represent the research team, to share the findings and will answer your questions later on. So just a little bit of introduction. Krisna holds 2 master's degree in economics from Universitas Indonesia and also from VU University Amsterdam. And he's also currently finishing his PhD from Harvard School of Public Policy at the Australian National University. And he's been an expert analyst on trade and industry. So it's a pleasure to have him here today to share his insights. If you are interested in the full analysis of the Neraca Komoditas, you can also download it for free. We'll be showing that in your screen in a moment. There will be also a link that you can access, and my colleague Dira will share the link in the chat box for you to access easily. So it's a very brand new publication that we just published today, but it's already up in our website, so feel free to download that. Through the research, we realized that the Neraca Komoditas, because it's quite new, it's also still a mystery to a lot of people. How it works, what it means for businesses and industries, what are the implications for Indonesia's trade regime, and whether it will actually bring efficiencies as intended, or instead it might harm the private sectors. These are all of the questions that came up when we looked into the new system. So we'll be exploring these questions in today's discussion. And today's session, Ms. Krisna Gupta will first share the key findings of the paper for about 15 minutes. And then later on, we'll invite you to ask questions to our speaker during discussion and Q&A session. During the discussion, you'll also get a chance to share your thoughts. So not only questions, but comments or feedback or thoughts are also welcome about the NK implementation or maybe how your businesses have been affected by this or might be affected by this. There are two ways that you can do this later on. You can either raise your hand and I'll invite you to speak live, or you can also post your questions or comments in the chat box and I will read them out for you. Great, so that's for the introduction. I'm sure we're all excited to hear about the research findings. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mas Krisna Gupta to present his findings. Mas Krisna, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Pippa. Hi, everyone. It's great pleasure to have you all here. So without spending too much time, let me just share my screen and we can talk about it. I hope it's visible to everyone and my voice is quite clear. Let me know if it's not the case. All right, so today I'm going to talk about the paper that we just finished writing on. The paper is called, this is the policy paper from CIPS. It has a bit of information on Indonesia's trade governance, especially on the quota, but we really focusing on this terms called Neraca Komoditas, right? So writing this was, it still is, I would say, a challenge, right? Because information on these is not very clear, and it's constantly changing, right? So there's a plenty of other regulations coming out citing this, and some regulations that we're expecting is not out just yet. So new information keeps coming. So it was a challenge, and strictly speaking, this we probably will learn a lot from you more than I give some stuff to you guys. So this is written by me and two of my colleagues, Stacy Pan and Doni Pasaribu. There's how to access it. But basically, Neraca Komoditas is a consequence of the Omnibus Law. So one of the wing of this Omnibus Law is talking about trade, and Neraca Komoditas is a term that is, used in one of the trade situation after an omnibus law. So in one of the PP, the government regulation, it says that Neraca Komoditas aims to improve access to intermediate input for firms. So if your firms that produce something that requires imported input, like beef, for example, if you import those stuff, or obviously we import lots of salt, sugar, wheat, right? So if you firm that import these things, this Neraca Komoditas aims to help you, right? So in granting better access to these inputs. It also hoped to hasten quota licensing process, both for export and import. After we read a little bit more on this Neraca Komoditas thing, it may be able to improve actually efficiency on licensing process. However, we do identify some problems with it that accompany the process. But our main recommendation is to do evaluation, wait for the massive before we do some kind of a massive adaptation. So let's go ahead and talk about what Neraca Komoditas is. So according to most of the people we talk to, the actual regulation, it will be a per good database based on a harmonized system, which has information on the quantity of domestic production, domestic consumption, stocks, delivery time, for example, in what month that you can deliver this much of production, or on what month you're going to consume these things, stuff like that, right? As well as the quality of that actual good. So the regulation is quite very detailed on this, very ambitious. So basically, the amount of quotas. So for you who already understand Indonesia's trade regime, right? When some of them are regulated by quota, you can't import more than these numbers. You can't export more than these numbers if it applies to your goods. So now the government is going to use this information strictly as the amount of quota that is granted that year. So for example, if Indonesia import things and this thing has a certain amount of consumption and has certain amounts of production, the discrepancy will be the amount that will be imported in the following year. The opposite is true for goods that has export quota attached to it. Right, so it's kind of strict regulation, but at the same time, then we kind of know what to expect because we know these data, we know the consumption, we know the production, so we know how much quota we will import or export, and it has like a strong data-based basis, right? Kind of give more confidence in making these numbers of import and export quota. For the moment, as far as we're concerned, as far as we know, there will be 5 goods that will follow this new system. And these are rice, beef, salt, sugar, and fishery products. And the rest will be, of these 5 goods will be regulated via presidential regulation. And the rest of the goods that is currently under quota restriction will follow using Neraca Komoditas in 2023. So how it will improve the red type. So basically here, if you see here, the green circle, so yeah, actually, let's start from the get-go. So first up, if you are an importing firm, or true as well for exporting firm, you want to import this good that is regulated by the Ministry of Trade, you first have to go to technical ministries, right? If you want to import steel, then you first go to the Ministry of Industry. If you want to import beef, you'd go then to Ministry of Agriculture, receive their technical recommendation, and then use that to apply for your license from Ministry of Trade, and then use that license from Ministry of Trade to actually import your good to the customs. With Neraca Komoditas, the technical ministry's role in this is no longer valid, right? So you can go ahead straight to Ministry of Trade because presumably these Neraca Komoditas will be enough to cover the technical ministry's recommendation, right? Because we have this data, we no longer need the technical ministry's approval because it is embedded in the Neraca Komoditas. That's the logic here behind this cut of the red tape. This potentially be will be improvement because, you know, then one less bureaucracy you will be faced by the firms, but also in these technical ministry steps are usually where the corruption cases coming from, right? If you remember the beef case, it's from these technical ministries. So cutting this one probably helps with combating corruption as well as making things a bit faster. Technical ministries do still have some sort of say in this when they are actually proposing the Neraca Komoditas, right? So when the government discuss the Neraca Komoditas, talking about what kind of production and consumption that actually the true sole data, technical ministries are involved in that, and so they and then decide on together agree on the certain amount of quota, but not on the licensing step anymore. Additionally, there will be one portal only. I think some of firms probably actually already use this mechanism, right? Where before, if you go along to technical ministry, you have to open the website of that technical ministries, the web app, sorry, not website. And then you then go to Ministry of Trade web app and then to Customs web app. But after this, only one portal is needed. However, the background is still managed by multiple ministries, right? But one less login for firms. And lastly, there's this something called fictive positive. I'm not really sure how to translate this to English, but basically, it says that if you have a complete document, then the license can be automatically generated after 5 days if you did not get anything back from the ministry, right? So if the ministry is a bit too slow, after 5 days, your document's complete, generated automatically your license. So this will potentially improve the speed time of the bureaucracy. That said, there are things that we kind of concern. So first, is the system ready? Because if we only rely on one system, then basically the whole traffic goes through that in all steps, right? The Ministry of Trade steps, the custom step, everything goes through it. I've heard some anecdotes that there was a little bit of a problem, but I think it's kind of finished by now. It's cleared by now. So yeah, this is something that probably the first thing that we can help, that we can finish, we can fix. But the using of the data is really a bit concerning to us. A bit is a bit too kind, but because for these until up to now, data collection has not been reliable enough. We've seen people, for example, data on salt production and consumption from Ministry of Industry versus Ministry of Fisheries. There's a dispute on that between ministries, as well as, for example, corn, where, Ministry of Agriculture says we have plenty of corns, but then Ministry of Trade says we don't have it in the market. Hence, we import these things. We're not sure if the collection of the data of the Neraca Komoditas is not improved, i.e., we use the same mechanism where agriculture do their own, and then industry do their own, and then the trade do their own, and then they kind of meet together again in the coordinating ministries. We're not clear how it will help with this, as long as the data collection is still based on different ministries, right? The firms that the ministries talk to might not be representative. There's a lot of smaller firms that probably need this imported inputs, and in aggregation, more complex goods could get oversimplified. Like, for example, if there's apparently some coal that Indonesians don't use but is used by Japanese firms, this kind of thing are both in the same harmonized system code, but in the more detailed version, it's different, actually. So it's a bit more nuanced, and we're kind of scared that it will be lost in the aggregation, these complex things. And this is just talking about coal, right? We can also talk about steel, and then electronics, automotive, where they require different kind of steels for different products, this kind of very specialized goods. And then using such the data, first, it's hard to collect such a very, very specialized data, very deep data. Using it to control trade may even more problematic, right? First of all, we kind of lost all flexibility. If we focus just this NK, it will be used for whatever happens, right? So it's hard if something that is changes is actually not quota production, or if there's some kind of a shock in the global market or in the domestic market. As we saw in the CPO, for example, if we look at the production and consumption, there probably won't be changes. But then the sudden improvement in global price makes firms want to export more, and then based on that price, the Ministry of Trade kind of make it harder for CPO firms to export. But if they strictly use that regulating export based on based on quantity, then they probably can't do it, right? They did it because of price. So without this price, it's hard if we focus solely on this using this NK. Moreover, firms can inform false information. If firms knows that if I report more import, so I can get more import later on, hence more import means lower prices for me in the next year, then it's good for me to inform that I will need a lot of imports, more than I need, right? The opposite is true for exporters. Or the producers of that import, right? They can say, oh, I will produce a lot, so we will have small Neraca Komoditas, and then you can push up domestic prices. So this is a challenge even at the moment, I think, the current system without Neraca Komoditas, and we're not sure how this is handled with the Neraca Komoditas in place. Market is constantly changing very fast, so the government needs to keep on revising, otherwise they can't keep up, right? Can we do it quick enough? That's the question. And then deploy that on the system quick enough. And then, of course, production, consumption, it all reported based on a certain level of price. If price go up, then the production can be scaled up, right? And then consumption probably go down because price is too expensive. what about it? What will happen if that happens, right? If we focus too much on quantity. Especially since Indonesian government keeps on using this trade ban, this trade quota restriction to control price, not quantity. So yeah, that's kind of what we're concerned about if we focus on just using the quantity. Instead of doing it right now, right? Like if you want to ban it, ban it. We don't need some sort of justification. We see all prices up, so we kind of open import, stuff like that. Then if Neraca Komoditas is going to be like that, then it's actually not improving the amount of quota that's granted to firms. Uncertainty is another issue, right? So one of the government regulation, the number 28, 2021, suggests possibility of adding more regulated goods. So the list in this PP 28 is so extensive. Half of them, approximately, is not currently regulated. For example, like CPO, it's not regulated before we see the global price, and then suddenly the government decided to add this to the export fiasco. So this adds actually to more uncertainty. So if your goods that you currently import is in this list, you better be careful. Next up, the fair price on the 5 goods is not out yet. Adds to uncertainty, right? And then the legal fiasco, not to mention the legal fiasco with the Constitutional Court on the omnibus law. Hence, the follow-up rules is probably under scrutiny as well. So we're not sure what to expect here, whether actually these 5 goods are going to be regulated at the moment or not, right? Complexity between goods are not the same. I kind of a little bit covered this previously when I mentioned about the loss in aggregation. So I'm going to skip it for now. Possible retaliation from trading partners, right? Especially if we introduce more things like the CPO ban, coal ban. Probably not the best way to start the G20 presidency, where we emphasize on multilateralism, talk with each other, stuff like that. Not sure about this, but probably not the best way to start it. And lastly, the public consultation, that's not wide enough. So yeah, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, right? Information keeps changing, and a lot of things are still unclear even right now. So can NK actually solve the intermediate input access problems? This is the basic idea of why we need this, right? While the new licensing system might be improving, there are, like we discussed previously, there are things that might counterbalance that. So yeah, we have to see. I won't say no very, very strongly here, that I added probably over there, because it hasn't been done yet, and we will see if it's going well or not. But yeah, we're kind of a little bit skeptical for now. Of course, our minds can change anytime when we actually see the NK in action. However, NK do presents an opportunity to improve quota granting transparency, right? How much firms get how much quota for this year, these kind of things, with the collection of the data, like how much production that the government thinks will be, how much consumption the government thinks will be. If it actually helps, there's an opportunity to actually open that to public, especially since this NK will be the sole data where the government will no longer fight with each other which data is true, right? And then present this to the people is actually a good start. So we encourage the government to do this, publish the actual NK when they finish making it, right? Don't forget that collecting data is good. Using it straight away for your policy is a different matter, right? So starting with 5 goods, that is relatively simple, is okay-ish, we say, as a good pilot project, right? We have a chance to evaluate these 5 goods, how the system works, is it good, is it not good, how to improve them. So it's okay for now, but when we scale up to more complex goods, then we have to be very, 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 very careful, right? Especially the goods that has a lot of value chain in it, interact with the world in a way that we are not truly understand. So we also lastly recommend a business survey to improve the understanding on how the new system works in the field, right? Because sometimes what's written in the rule is a little bit different than what's happened in the field. This opens up a chance to make a study on these new, brand new sets of policies, a new Indonesian trade regime. So that's it. I hope I'm not too over time, and looking forward to discussion. Back to you, Pipa.
Thank you so much, Ms. Krisna. That was a wonderful presentation that I think really shed light on this new mysterious trade regime. So now we'll open the discussion and Q&A. And we would like to invite you to ask questions or provide your comments. Before we do that, just a quick recommendation, a quick reminder to participants to please rename your Zoom with your name _ your institution. And there will also be two ways of asking questions or providing comments. You can either raise your hand and I will call you and you can post your questions live, or you can post it in the chat box and I'll read it aloud and ask them for you. So it seems like we already have several questions. I'm receiving one from Robert. So Robert asks, how does the Neraca Komoditas impact free trade agreements that Indonesia has signed, given that Neraca Komoditas will regulate the total import or export quota of a product? Or does the trade quota will not be a problem for free trade agreements because it is non-discriminatory?
Should I straight away answer, Pipa, or you want to follow? Okay, cool.
Sure.
So yeah, cheers. So thanks for the question. That's a pretty interesting one. We are not sure, partly because we don't think that this will change any currently quota restriction, right? It's just improving. It's just a way to improve the way that we grant quota. But I probably won't change that we do have this quota restriction, or whether this will be non-discriminatory or not, right? So we will still think this is the same old stuff, but more improved version of the whole bureaucratic thing. So yeah, to answer your question, probably won't matter too much on the as long as the trading partner is fine with the current quota, then the NK won't add to their headache.
Great, thank you, Ms. Krisna. We have a question from Mas Andre. Feel free to turn your video and also your mic on.
Yeah, thanks, Pipa. I got two questions in my mind. And first, I just want to make sure. So the Neraca Komoditas is based on firms' reports on production. It's not based on a custom data. Is that correct?
Okay, sorry. This is another things that we are not clear at the moment. There is one Neraca Komoditas that's actually out, but not Neraca Komoditas itself, right? But it's the way they will collect it, and it's on the fisheries. According to that regulation, they won't use just the customs data, but also they will go to the field, look at how much domestic production happened, how much people's consumption, and how much firm consumption from the Ministry of Industry, and then collect them into this Neraca Komoditas one. So yeah, not just customs, but plenty other ways.
I see. Okay. The second question, I have maybe a little bit of a comment on, and that we can discuss. The Constitutional Court decision basically says that government cannot issue any other regulation for the next 2 years until they fix the problem. And you said that the purpose is not out yet, right? And of course, the criteria is that you cannot issue things that has strategic implication, which means affects a lot of people. I would say that the Neraca Komoditas affects everyone, or at least in these 5 commodities, all the businesses there. So I'm kind of thinking that this might not actually come out, like nothing will happen in the next 2 years, because they're forbidden. It's illegal to do that. So what do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting take. Well, we'll bite. Actually, we're not sure. When this Neraca Komoditas first came out, right? We were kind of shocked in a way that, oh wow, finally we have some new reform stuff, right? At that time, it wasn't clear if this the omnibus law is going to face a scrutiny from the MK, just because it seems like the publics, the government really wants this, and they able to do it, right, in a very quick way, in a very quick succession, we think, oh, this is going to be out for sure. And then that MK starts to add to the uncertainty. And we really agree with you. Probably for now, onwards, then it becomes a little bit, we're not sure. So yeah, basically what you say. But at the time of the writing, it wasn't very clear that it will be this unclear, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I just don't think we're going to see anything with the 5 commodities even. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you, Mas Andre, for that question and comment. So we have another one from Pak Jason. Silakan, Pak.
Hello, Bu Pipa. Thank you so much. I hope you're doing well since we last spoke. And Pak Krisna, nice to meet you as well. So perhaps to add a little bit, you know, obviously my name is so that's something that we have experienced firsthand. So far, the process has been actually quite okay. You know, there's some issues perhaps with the new system because of it's the INSW and there's the SSM perizinan and then INATRADE. It's, you know, we face some, you know, system issues, but overall, I think we appreciate, you know, the government effort of trying to make this, you know, satu pintu, one door, right? And then also trying to bring out the transparency of what the raw material needs, right, through this MK system. So I think we generally appreciate the spirit of the government as well in this. I think my question to you both would be that one of the industry concern, which I think Pak Krisna touched earlier, and also I've seen, you know, in your paper briefly, is in regards to the data integrity, right? And, you know, Pak Krisna mentioned about the collection of data from various ministries and so on. And we do see that, and that's something that's of a concern, right? What if the raw material availability appears to be overestimated, right? Such that, you know, of course, what they say from what we can import is so much lower than what industry actually need. You know, because there would be a deadlock situation whereby it's very risky for industry, right? So I just want to, you know, ask, you know, if you have any thoughts, you know, or recommendations on how do you think it's best, you know, to collect this data as objectively as possible? Because I think I agree with you both that there would be the most critical part of making this NK, you know, a successful system. Otherwise, wrong data would mean that, you know, generally I think a lower supply of availability, which, you know, which would be a very risky and, you know, for industry, and especially now we have opportunities because industry can keep operating in Indonesia and we have a lot of export market we can serve. But with no raw material means that, you know, we cannot serve those markets. So just want to hear, you know, your thoughts, if there's any recommendations, because I think that would be very helpful in terms of the data collection policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pak Jason. That's a great question. So let me start with at the first. We are all agree that we need to improve the whole bureaucracy of trade, right? So that's also the period in which we write this paper. That's why we do concern about the system, and we're kind of glad that you mentioned that this is now working fine. If we upscale, however, we will see, right? But we look forward that the government will learn on how to do this system, and then they will be better with themselves, and the whole system will be much better in the long run. On the question 2, how do we collect this data is, well, the real what we mentioned on the paper, the main problem is there's an incentive for both parties to inflate the numbers, right? So if you auto industries that import steel, you want to say, oh, I import a lot, right? So then next year you can import a lot, actually. Even though you don't import it, price will go down, right? Because, you know, more import, more supply from the global market, then cheaper steel for you. On the other hand, they know that the steel market, the steel maker will say that they will produce a lot to counteract that, because they know that the steel importers will ask for more. So because of this guy, both has the incentive to wrongly say how much they need or how much they produce. Of course, for us, the best way is first eliminate this incentive by not having a very strict quota. That's one, right? this quota actually creates these incentives. But if that's impossible, then yeah, I do believe that there is no straightforward way to collect the actual data. We did also mention about the problem with using time series, right? Because every year is a new problem. Look at CPO. If we look at the discrepancy between export and import domestically, if we look at the discrepancy between domestic production and domestic consumption, there's nothing changes that much, but price goes skyrocket. For the reason that we don't need to talk about in this meeting, but yeah, it's kind of problematic to actually try using it, especially if we don't know how best to collect the data. Especially if we move up the value chain, right? The more complex things is, the easier it is to go RE. But for now, I think what we can do, if these 5 goods actually move on, we can learn from that, right? We can learn from the mistake that's probably coming. Obviously, it's better if there's no mistake at all. But if we get best practice from these 5, then we probably can find a better way to move up the value chain. Otherwise, if we're still worried, then we kind of recommend wait until we are sure what we're doing. That's basically, for now, what we have in mind. Thank you, Pak Jason, for your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pak Jason, for the answers. We have actually the research team, Bang Doni. Feel free.
Yeah, just to add some things to, can you hear me clearly? Just checking.
Go ahead, Don.
Just to add some things to what Krisna already said. I mean, I may have a different position in this. I am much more skeptical about the whole idea to begin with. The idea of a government that can actually predict how much quantity that, you know, consumer and producer are going to produce or consume in the future is, to me, is what's the word? Unrealistic at all, right? I mean, we've seen in the past how this kind of efforts actually brings so much pain, so much problems to consumers, especially with the high price of food commodities, especially rice and other things. And now we want to expand it to other things. Say, like we started with 5 commodities. Even if they appear to be successful, there's still going to be a lot of problem along the way. And I feel like even though there may be effort to increase the data quality, it should be in the effort to improve our research, improve our understanding of how trade works, instead of trying to regulate it. But it is against the spirit of trying to ensure that the domestic market can get enough raw materials, because that's the original idea of why we have Neraca to begin with, to ensure that there is enough raw materials, imported raw materials for everyone. It should not be to limit what industry can get, right? But now we have concerns that it may lead to that kind of things. So I feel like, sure, we need to minimize the potential problem, but if it is possible, let's hope that it should not happen at all. Okay, that's my position. And if you see our paper, we discuss it quite at length anyway, that if the problem is access to raw materials, then the solution should be to allow more imports to raw materials, not limiting it. Okay, we discussed this at length in our paper. I think I just need to mention that because that's because, you know, that we already discussed it in our paper, and we make our argument clearly in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bang Doni, for that wonderful addition. A reminder to everyone, as Bang Doni said, that is analyzed quite extensively in the paper, which you can download freely from the website. My colleague Tira will be sharing the link again later on. But yeah, that's a good point, which brings me, I guess, to my question while we wait for more people to post questions. A reminder, you can raise your hand or post your questions or comments in the chat box. There's also some representatives from the ministries. We also invite you to share your perspective and maybe if more information from your end. But I have a question about this discussion because I think it's a really good point when we're talking about data, because the Neraca Komoditas is designed to improve the existing export-import system, but now it seems to be creating another set of problems on data, on the missing parts of prices and the missing components of quality that are limited from appearing in the database as well. But I think more fundamentally, the idea behind the Neraca Komoditas still seems to be based on the Indonesian self-sufficiency and protectionist policy that still prioritizes domestic production and supply and trying to avoid import. So maybe a question to Krisna, how do you think this policy position or this continuous protectionist that still sees import as just something, just in case we don't have enough domestically, then we can import, and not necessarily, as Bang Doni said, like a crucial input to industry? How do you see that affecting industry more generally?
Yeah, great question, Felippa. So I will begin that question with the answer of probably not much will happen after NK. That's one. Mainly because we've seen in the CPO, right? We don't use any production consumption data. So if we are skeptical, as Andre also mentioned, that NK will actually be used solely. There will be something else, we're sure. But the whole thing about the quota restriction is yeah, it's a mixed bag. But most of my answer is going to be, it's probably better to let firms play a little bit more role on this whole thing, right? Especially if we move up the value chain where decisions are made based on some complex reduction of where to source things and where to sell them. Because of this, especially if the regulators don't really understand a lot about the industry itself, then yeah, it would be very hard to actually move up the value chain ourselves, or using the global value chain to help, transitional economics to manufacturing. That's one. And secondly, I do believe that at least half probably of the intention of doing this is not just about the self-sufficiency argument. Well, we understand that that's probably one of the most important thing, but also because of the current account, right? Because import is bad, because it makes our current account negative, stuff like that. Interestingly, if for the people who are worried about current account, then using trade policy is actually going to make things worse, because mainly these days current account are driven by financial transaction, right? Especially if a country like Indonesia who want to improve their foreign investment, we don't have enough capital domestically produced, so we have to import machinery, stuff like that. Then it is natural to see a negative current account, right? So this needs to be delivered in a way that people understand that negative current account or positive current account is nothing but accounting, right? As long as the current account is sustainable, we know where to look, we know where to spend the money, then it is actually desirable, especially for an investing country like Indonesia. So this is what's kind of a little bit misleading, right? Using trade policy to counteract with the current account. So that's my answer to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Krisna. This is, I think, an important discussion ahead of the G20 presidency. We'll definitely be talking about trade and multilateralism, and it's quite interesting to see how the Indonesian government is coming with new systems on trade. I would like to invite more people to maybe raise your hand if you have any questions, or if not, you can also post your questions or comments in the chat box. I'll be asking them to Ms. Krisna. We have still a couple minutes to go, so maybe this is a good time for me then to ask more questions, because I'm quite interested in one of your points about the Neraca Komoditas will hopefully hasten the import process, and we hear this also from Pak Jason earlier. It seems to be working in some sense to facilitate the import process a little bit, which is very much welcomed in Indonesia, because one of the big challenges for import in the previous system is always about timing. Imports can come in during harvest season, and then prices will drop and to farmers' protests, or in contrast, imports can be very, very delayed, which cause shortages and also skyrocketing prices. So you mentioned earlier that the Neraca Komoditas does have an opportunity to cut down the timing on the import. So maybe can you elaborate more on that, and how do you see the Neraca Komoditas addressing this problem?
Yeah, great question. So, as I discussed previously, there will be a red tape that's cut, right? So the technical ministry is no longer needed if the Neraca Komoditas is actually used when the regulations come out. If the main reason why these delays are happening is because of the technical ministries, then for sure it will improve the speed, right? So this is something that we haven't looked at. So once a firm, and also the reason why we need this business survey, according to our opinion, is because the speed at which the first firm wants to import until they actually get the license, until they actually use it to import stuff, is unknown to us, right? If this delay is mainly on the technical ministries, then cutting it will benefit a lot, right? So that's one thing. And secondly, if the Neraca Komoditas is actually accurate and better production, is a better estimation than the ministry's own judgment, then we probably see parity improvement. So on that regard, if we compare that to status quo, then there is a potential improvement in speed, but we will have to see how it plays out. And probably I will have to invite Tony again, because add me, Tony.
Yes, Tony.
Hi. So again, I agree with what Krisna has said earlier about the potential of it increasing. But again, I have to add caution to what he just mentioned, because, well, a big chunk of our paper is actually about the idea that bad data is worse than no data. Bad data creates a sense of confidence that's not supposed to be there, as if we know something that we don't actually know, right? Any effort to increase the quality of the data should be supported. We have to support any effort to make better data of anything, production, consumption, anything, right? But it will never be accurate. It will never be accurate because the market is so fluid. It changes all the time, second by second, right? At the moment, this is the price. At the moment, this is the quantity. But what about next minute? What about next hour? What about next month? Right? There's no possibility. Like, I am an economist, and I can say with confidence that there's no way anyone can ever predict that in the future. But what the Neraca is trying to do is so ambitious that it's unrealistic to expect that you can estimate the number for the next year based on what we know last year. We discussed it like in the paper quite at length about this, as I mentioned again, and only the market can respond quickly to these kind of things. Price change, quantity change, and to have a set number of quantity for a whole year it just doesn't make sense, really. We can try to make it better, we can try to understand it better, but to try to control it is, I think, is actually not just, it's actually dangerous, I would say. So, yeah, it can make it faster, it can make it, you know, the bureaucracy easier. However, that sense of confidence, I think, is unfounded and can be dangerous if we rely on it too much. I guess I need to make that point clearly because, yeah, that's the main argument, I guess, of our paper. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bang Doni. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess sharing from the work that Center for Indonesian Policy Studies have done, we've actually done quite an extensive work on improving agriculture data. For example, having the area sampling frame for rice, and then also on data accuracy for horticulture crops or other food crops. So we've been working with our senior fellow from the Statistics Indonesia to continue to improve the data. But as Tony rightly said, the problem comes in when you tie that data into the export and import mechanism and system, which, as he said, is just impossible because of the data will never be accurate, and having that kind of confidence, as Tony said, is quite unfounded. And I think the also just another thing to add, we also have several papers that have talked about more broadly the idea of non-tariff measures in Indonesia's trade regime. And Neraca Komoditas is in essence an additional or a different type of non-tariff measures, right? Because it's still a quota, but only administered differently. And our previous papers on cost of non-tariff measures have continued to point out the costs that these kinds of non-tariff measures, especially quantitative restrictions, have on food security, food prices, and also the industry's access to raw materials. And that would affect, I think, the food and beverage manufacturing industry's growth, productivity, and things like that. So I think that's an ongoing discussion to be had. Ideally, how can Indonesia start to, as Krisna said, maybe transform the economic structure and reduce the non-tariff measures in general, not just changing it into a new system, right?
Yeah.
But Krisna, feel free to add if you have thoughts.
Oh, no. Donnie and Pipa, you guys already mentioned things that I want to say. Sorry, all good. There's a question in the chat. Do you want me to respond? Or?
Sure, I'll read it out to people. So the question from Column is on the new regulation on the Badan Pangan Nasional, the National Food Agency. Because as part of that regulation, the National Food Agency does seem to be granted discretionary power over trade, especially with efficient processes and improved data, as we have discussed. So any thoughts on that, Mas Krisna?
Yeah, so this is, I'm treading into your charted water, Pipa, on the food policies. But according to what we've seen, during the first partition of when we write this policy paper, wasn't clear that there will be Badan Pangan as well as there will be this Permendak number 18, 19, and 20 come out just now. So I'm not sure whether the BPN will actually, use this Peraturan 28 or not. But for sure, this discretionary power probably will be clashed with the Permendak 18, 19, 20. So this is turunan follow-up from also from Peraturan 28, but also Peraturan 29, which says that when there is a confusion, then the power goes to Ministry of Trade. Will this be overruled? That is another question, but we didn't look at BPN at much during the writing. So thanks, Colin, for pointing it out. This is definitely something very worth looking at. So yeah.
Thank you, Mas Krisna. Yes, just to add quickly on that, just on the textual, what's written on the text and the regulation, the BPN does seem to have quite extensive power, but again, we're not sure about how it will turn out in terms of the institutional capacity or the institutional strength to coordinate across the ministries. And we are at the moment having more questions, and I'm looking into what will happen with the National Food Agency. And I think Mas Andre is also does have some comments. Feel free, Mas Andre.
Yeah, thanks, Felippa. Sorry, I think I forgot to turn on my video just now. Yeah, so it's just one thing I noticed, right, in this discussion, like when we're discussing the Neraca Komoditas, there's actually, I mean, the five things, you know, rice, beef, and I think the intention comes from actually the consumption side, not really the production side. Like I know we're talking about, you know, raw material. Businesses shouldn't be stopped from getting the raw materials they need. So yes, these are raw materials for industry, but I get a feeling that this regulation actually comes out because there's a lot of public pressure on the consumption of rice price going up, beef price going up. So it's actually the end consumer in Indonesia. So I think there's an impasse here between, you know, like you're talking about industry, but the government is not really thinking about industry. They're not thinking about export rice as a raw material. They're not thinking about beef as a raw material. They're not thinking about sugar and salt as the raw material. I don't think that's so. How can we reconcile this? Because they are actually big industrial raw materials, to be honest, right? So that's just my thought. I think there's an impasse here. There's a total gap between what's being regulated, the intention, and why it should be regulated. You know?
Right. So, good point, Andre. This is also what we pointed out in the paper. That is, well, depends on what you mean by government. Is it Ministry of Trade? Is it Ministry of Industry? Is it Ministry of Agriculture? These ministries, we wrote, have different interests, right? So, for example, PP 28 about industry is kind of, we're really sure drafted by Ministry of Industry, but then the number 29 is drafted by the Ministry of Trade. If you think there's this whole leaking in the logic of the rules, that's probably, I said probably, because they don't talk to each other very closely, right? They don't have enough meetings with each other, which also then lead us to question this whole system turns into one, but the background are still ministries talking to each other, exactly like we said. So we didn't get this confidence that the government actually now have the same mind, right? Each ministries have their own, they already, you know, combine their thoughts, and this is our products. If you still think there's probably still, you know, a scattered thinking between ministries that drafted this regulation, then probably you are correct. Probably this is the reason why. Probably, you know, the government hasn't talked enough with each other. And we also point that out in the paper. Thanks for pointing it out.
Thank you so much, Mas Andre and Mas Krisna. Okay, so I think we're running out of time. We have a couple of minutes left. So I would like to invite Mas Krisna and also Bang Doni later to provide last comments just to close this discussion. And then afterwards, we'll close the event. So Mas Krisna, any last words?
Last word for today's event for me is thanks for showing up, people. Acknowledgedly, is that a word? We are also, you know, we still have things we need to answer ourselves. So if you think there's an additional things that can improve this paper, our understanding on how Neraca Komoditas works, if you're from the government, if you're from the firms that actually using this platform, you want us to, you know, help understand things together, or conduct a business survey ourselves, for example, or whatever, things like that, please feel free to contact us, because we are humbly acknowledge that, you know, this Neraca Komoditas has not moved yet, and we also still have questions need to answer ourselves. So yeah, feel free to talk to us. We'll be more than happy to do so. Thanks, Felippa.
Thank you, Mas Krisna. Doni?
Is he there? Hey, Don.
Perhaps not.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity to share our idea, and yeah, we really welcome any input, really. Yeah, that's all, I guess. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Doni and Krisna, and a special thanks to everyone for participating in today's discussion. I hope it has been a useful and insightful discussion for all of you. As a reminder, the full analysis on the paper is up on our website and you can download it for free. Either you can scan the QR code here, or you also can access the link that is available in the chat box. So there's a more extensive analysis on the issues and risks that come with the Neraca Komoditas as we've discussed today. I really do hope that our session today has provided you with a little bit more information about Neraca Komoditas. And I echo what Krisna and Doni said. We're always happy to have further discussion and receive your comments. So you can reach out to us from this accounts and also from this email. We'll be happy to have more conversations like this. And that is all of our today's events. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in future CIPS events. And I hope you stay well and stay healthy. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.